So most of us might have a reasonable idea about what assessment literacy is, but how does assessment fit into teaching and learning as far as the teacher is concerned? Well, if we look at this, is a theoretical model of testing, of test use. This is the socio-cognitive model, which was worked upon by my boss, Barry O'Sullivan, and this is a version of the theory from 2016. And here we see the socio-cognitive model. It emphasizes, on the one hand, a kind of social context in which a test takes place, and also the cognitive side is what's going on inside the test taker. So what are their thought processes? What are they actually doing when they do the test? So if you look at the kind of the box on the left there, this emphasizes the test system. So that means the test itself and the context it's given in, and the domain of language use. So what kind of language are we using to put in our tests? And this needs to be relevant for, whether you're testing in a university, in a high school, in Turkey, in China, wherever it might be. So the test has to be shown to fit with the needs of the context. So we've got, inside that box, we've got the test system, the test taker, and the scoring system. And all of these things interact to actually produce the test and the test performance, which we can measure. So what do we have on this block on the right-hand side? Well, these are the stakeholders. So obviously the test taker is at the top, but this goes down through people within a school or an institution, through to people in wider society. And of course, there could be hundreds of different stakeholders, but these are some of the most common that we may think of. So this is including, people in government, academics, people who work in the legal side of things. So this is not an exhaustive list. And it's important to see that the consequences work both ways here. So the test impacts on the stakeholders. We have an effect on our test takers. Obviously, the test impacts their lives. But also the test takers have an impact on the test. So how many test takers there are, where they come from, these will all have an impact on how the test is designed. So this cause and effect works both ways. We often think of it as just working from the test, having an impact on everybody else. But actually, the people involved in the test have an impact on how the test is conducted and created. So this is again from Barry O'Sullivan. This is about the learning system. And we have three components of the learning system here. We've got the curriculum at the top, which is kind of driving a lot of things. The delivery. And the delivery, that's the teaching, the staff, the teachers themselves, teacher training, the materials, the physical environment of the school even. And of course, we've got the assessment, which should be planned into the system. And these are all interdependent. They affect each other. You can't change one without changing the other, or you shouldn't change one without changing the other. And these are all unified by some kind of underlying philosophy of learning or some kind of standards. So this could be, for example, the CEFR. And if the CEFR is common to all of these strands of learning. So CEFR could inform your curriculum about the kind of objectives you have. It can inform assessment, of course, because you're going to test those objectives. And it's going to inform the delivery as well, because you should be teaching to the same objectives and have materials which fulfill those objectives as well. The problem here is that as these are all interdependent, is if one of these is seen as separate, or if one of these is external, then it disrupts everything else. So if you break one part, then you break the whole system, basically. And this learning system exists within this context as well. And it has, and the same kind of cause and effect applies. So this is just a way of showing how, teaching and learning, as Esin said at the beginning, teaching and learning are integrated and they all depend on each other. I think we have a good idea about how that works, but we're just framing that within wider society as well. And this is important for assessment literacy. So what about the classroom? Well, this is like a more kind of local version of what we've just seen. We've got the teacher and the students at the center, of course. And this, the teacher is kind of driving the philosophy and the model of learning in the classroom. The teacher knows the context of the classroom best and can make decisions within the institution and within their classroom. And again, this can be disrupted very easily through curriculum, poor learning objectives, assessment, badly designed tests, delivery, poor materials or methodology, and the teacher is at the center of all of these. So of course the teacher needs to know about curriculum, about delivery, about teaching, but assessment is also absolutely crucial. Here's a look at some of the opportunities for assessment that we have in our teaching learning programs. Assessment is just a constant that's always with us, and I'm sure you can recognize lots of these assessments that you might have through one semester. Let's say at the beginning of the year, you might start with a placement test or a proficiency test or some other kind of baseline. And that is going to influence how you put your students into different classes, whether they go straight to faculty, those kinds of decisions. Those who stay in the English preparatory classes, well, they undergo lots of assessment all the way through the semester. Could be quizzes, could be progress tests, could be midterms, could be other kinds of tests. And these are more on the summative side. So these are where we're interested in giving people scores, making judgments, basically, about our students. On the bottom of the program there, on the bottom side of the diagram, you've got the more kind of formative aspects. So you've got peer assessment, self-assessment, diagnostic testing, and other things. And also, during every single lesson, teachers are performing assessments. So even those, those questions in class that are happening in real time, observations of our students, monitoring of our students during the class, these are all assessments. We don't think of them as assessments, but they are. They're a type of formative assessment. So we're making evaluations the whole time during our classes. So bringing the teacher into this, well, this is the diagram I showed you before. And of course, this fits very closely with teachers. Teachers are a central part of the assessment system, as we've shown. This is a way of representing the levels of knowledge and skills which are needed by different people, which was shown by Linda Taylor. It's quite a well-known diagram, and it puts this assessment core right in the middle in the dark blue. That's all about the kind of the theoretical and technical know-how, the ethical principles of language testing, and that's what I'm supposed to know about as a researcher, and what other assessment professionals are supposed to know about as well. So if you're involved in testing, then you should be familiar with these concepts. But there are other stakeholder groups as well. So, of course, we have teachers. They're in a slightly kind of intermediate zone, course instructors, and then on the periphery, on the outside, the people who need to know, not quite so much, but they still need to be aware of assessment, are people like policymakers, government, and the general public. And when they don't have assessment literacy, then even if those people don't have assessment literacy, then there's a problem, because Parliament are making decisions, and the public is in some way informing those decisions. Very recently, we had a case in the UK where the A-level exams, which people take at the age of 18, obviously because of COVID, those exams couldn't take place. So there were teacher assessments made. Teacher assessments were made, and people were going to university or not on the basis of those teacher assessments, on those estimated grades. And what the government did was they made an algorithm where they put all the estimated grades through a computer program, and the computer program made some adjustments according to where students came from, what kind of school it was. And then they basically changed the teacher assessment and came out with these final grades. And of course, when teachers saw that, they'd given somebody a grade and then it had been completely changed by a computer, not by a human, then it caused a big scandal, and basically the government had to scrap the whole system. Actually, if they'd known a little bit more about assessment, and if they'd asked the teachers, they might not have had this problem. So that was something which is a kind of big scandal in the UK, and I'm sure you've experienced other, decisions which have perhaps not been helpful sometimes by educational boards and governments and things like that. So we've got language teachers there in the middle. So looking at them a little bit more, in a bit more detail. Again, this is Linda Taylor. This is how she schematized language assessment literacy and what people need. So if we look here, we can see what people should be competent in, their knowledge, their skills, their understanding for their domain of activity, shall we say, for their job, basically. So if you're a tester here, then bad luck, because this is D, professional language testers. Basically, you need to know everything. So like the scores here for all the different areas of testing are very high. So you need to know about local practices, beliefs and attitudes, scoring, theoretical aspects, the technical skills of making a test, etc. So we have other things here. We have the administrators. That's here, part C, and that's very interesting because that's quite a, shall we say, a jagged or uneven profile. So here, scores and decision making obviously is what administrators are interested in. And they don't really need to know that much about what happens in the classroom, language pedagogy, but they do need to know about the scores, what they are, and how to interpret them. And if you're a teacher, well, this is the profile for a teacher. So here it's the practical know-how which is needed to produce tests, and see how that fits in with pedagogy, language acquisition. So there's less emphasis here on technical aspects like measurement theory or ethics or decision making. And this is an area that we're still exploring, people really trying to find out what the very specific needs of teachers are. And there are these huge language assessment literacy surveys of teachers and administrators and people in society in general. And if you read about language assessment literacy, you may have come across some of those surveys. So teachers need to know about assessment, but they don't need to know about assessment, or that's what they say. Well, teaching is about nurturing, building relationships and helping people, isn't it? That's what we're there for in the classroom, to help students. But assessment seems to threaten. Assessment is often seen as this kind of punishment, failing people, and spoiling that relationship between teachers and students. And sometimes teachers feel in a very difficult position, having built up those relationships. And assessment's also seen as a way to block opportunities. It's this gatekeeper. It allows some people in through the gates, and it locks the gate for other people, and it's a barrier to opportunities. And that's, that makes students feel bad, and we don't like making students feel bad. Also, there could be personal reasons. Everybody you speak to has had some kind of bad experience with assessment. And often assessment is seen as something separate from teaching, and something technical as well. It might involve statistics, and maths and things. We don't want maths. People do the language teaching because they want to get away from maths and do something else. So, they think that it's not something creative, and maybe it doesn't, exploit their skills. I would argue with that. I would say that actually testing can be quite creative. But these are common perceptions, and they are real. So our task is to make assessment literacy more accessible. And, these negative attitudes are kind of supported by evidence of different surveys of teachers. Here was one, this was done by British Council. And it shows what teachers think. They're not really interested in the topic. They think of testing and not assessment, kind of in a wider sense. They have a lack of training, and they know that, but that's not a problem, because we're not interested anyway. And language assessment literacy, the term, doesn't really mean anything. And this is one of the problems I said with the word literacy before, can be a bit problematic. So this kind of, this is quite a narrow view of assessment, and it's natural, but is a little bit unfortunate, and it's quite counterproductive in the end to teaching and learning. Now, anecdotally, we also have evidence of this. Here's some of my own personal experience. In 2019, I was at the TESOL conference in the United States, and I spent the whole day talking to teachers and teacher trainers who were passing by the British Council stands that I was on. A lot of them on state teaching programs, master's programs, and the same things kept coming up. So the feedback again from teachers, what they didn't need or want to know about assessment. And surprisingly, the trainers also felt quite uneasy. They recognized the importance of assessment, but they didn't really feel qualified themselves to talk about it. And they themselves wanted to improve their skills, or in many cases, they just wanted somebody else to teach the assessment part of the course. So it's like, here's the teaching part, that's my job. And if we can get somebody from outside to teach the assessment part, that would be great, because I don't feel qualified to do that. Other evidence. Well, we've done workshops as well for Turkish teachers, different workshops, assessment literacy training for Turkish professionals who are teachers, some who are working in testing. And we found, what do we find? Their background, very well qualified, often had master's degrees, and often had quite a lot of experience. But we also found that people were producing tests without evaluating them or considering their validity, certainly not in any methodical kind of way. And they certainly didn't use results to evaluate test performance. It also ran workshop for teachers and language testers in Chile. And again, they have very little background in assessment, even though most of them were working in assessment. So I had a lot of enthusiasm. We were doing a statistics course, which is supposed to be not a popular part of language testing, but they really took to it and they wanted more, in fact. They wanted more time to work on it. It's a complex area. So this is so this shows, sorry, I'll go back. So this shows basically from different contexts, from Turkey, from South America, from North America, from the US, you know, that there are these common concerns. This is not something which is limited to one area of the world or one type of institution. This is common to lots of people globally. So here again, this is James Popham, who also worked in assessment literacy, and basically he's just saying it is essential. It's a sine qua non. So it's something you can't do without. It has to be part of a teacher's repertoire. So we need to know about assessment. So to kind of summarize, why do teachers need to know? Well, for one thing, they spend a lot of time doing it. As we saw from Stiggins, he said something like up to 30 or 40% of a teacher's time is either spent preparing students for assessment or carrying out the assessment themselves. So if you're going to spend that much time on it, then it's probably you need to be good at it. As we know, tests can have high stakes, so we need to know about fairness and making sure that we're making the right decisions. We need to know that tests should be used for the right purposes. So a test that could be a proficiency test is not a suitable test for your classroom. Or formative assessment, which you might use all the time in the classroom, maybe shouldn't be used in proficiency testing. Well, for professional development, it's a good career opportunity and just helps you to know more about your line of work. Positive washback. So this is the effect of assessment on learning. So if we have good washback, that means that because people are studying with the test in mind, then this means that they're learning the right things. And of course, that's conditional on having good tests. So that would be the washback. Related to that is better preparation for our students. That's part of our job, is to prepare them for tests. So that's what we need to be doing in an informed and qualified way. And of course, assessment informs learning. So the results of the test should show what comes next and what our learning objectives for the next part of the teaching learning cycle should be. And also knowing about the test helps us to understand the construct. So the construct is the ability which is being tested, whether it's a specific style of reading, a way of speaking, giving a presentation, or speaking in a group. So these are the constructs. And when we know what's in the assessment, then because it's the skill which is being tested, then we know which skill to teach. Now, that doesn't mean teaching to the test. I'll go through that next. I'll skip through this one. Okay. It doesn't mean teaching to the test and teaching what's only in the test. It means teaching to the construct. So thinking about what the skills are which are tested. So a good test will target very clear skills, a very clear construct. So when we have a test, we should always be thinking what kind of ability is being targeted specifically, not just speaking in general or listening in general, but what kind of speaking, what kind of listening, what kind of functional language will we need to perform that speaking test, for example. And our test specifications, that's our detailed description of what's in the test, should tell us exactly how the test is designed and what the content of the test should be. And that's the responsibility of test makers to give specifications so that teachers can see what's in the test and so that students can see what's in the test as well. Okay, we talked a lot about why it's important. So what are the opportunities that we have? Well, there are a lot of barriers to assessment literacy, especially at the moment. You know, courses cost money. They're also in parts of the world that we can't get to, so we can't travel there, especially at the moment. During COVID, everywhere is closed. And also we don't have time to do these things. Teachers are busy people. So what other resources are available? Well, I'm just going to show you a few resources which are free and which are online, which you may be able to use. So this is an obvious one, but it is important. So this is the CFR. And we talked before about standards as this unifying theme, bringing curriculum, assessment, and course delivery together. So this is why something like the CFR is very, very important. And if you use the CFR at your institution, then getting a better knowledge of the CFR is really, really important, and is going to help all parts of the learning system. And don't forget that the one here on the right, the companion volume, is a very good read, and has mediation scales, interaction scales, and updated scales from the Blue Book, which we know and love. And this is bringing teaching, learning, and assessment together and showing that relationship and showing, you know, the can-do descriptors, which are at the basis of everything. That's why it's the reference. So this is, don't neglect the CFR. Here's another resource that we have, very important, huge resource about all different aspects of assessment. This was funded by Erasmus, so it's a European project. I remember those days when we used to be part of Europe. Never mind, but you can still access the resources wherever you are. They're definitely worth checking out. And there are full materials, and there's a comprehensive program that teachers can work through here, or that they can choose from. So this is the TAIL project, it's called. And these are the people who created the TAIL project. So these people I mentioned earlier on, Dean Sagari and Karen Voigt, who worked on this project, and they even received an award because it was so good, and from my boss there. So do check that out. Okay, some of the other assessment boards have their own resources as well. I can recommend this one. This is the Trinity exams. Maybe not used very much in Turkey, I don't think, but Trinity is a very well established and very good. They make very interesting tests. And this is their page on assessment literacy. And again, this is a set of 12 videos of about 15 minutes long, I think, and they all have worksheets. So you can do these together with teachers. Again, Cambridge Assessment English. Not so many resources here, but they do have webinars for teachers. And of course, they do have lots of information about their tests. So if you're teaching people who are going to take a Cambridge test, CET, PET, or IELTS, or First Certificate, or one of those, then do go to this website as well. Which of course brings us to the British Council. So language assessment at the British Council. The British Council has become very involved in promoting understanding of language assessment and some of our activities. Again, we also have short videos, animation videos on important concepts in language assessment, testing the different skills. Many of these have worksheets as well for teachers and teacher trainers to work through. In better times, we had workshops on a variety of topics, and sometimes we still have online workshops working with British Council officers around the world so watch out for those. The language assessment in the classroom MOOC, which I'm going to talk about a little bit now. A glossary of language assessment terms and concepts, created by Christine Kum, who's a frequent visitor to Turkey, and you may have seen speak at various conferences. This is also on the British Council website. The British Council has lots of conferences. One of them, very famous one, is the New Directions one. This is carried out in Asia, like in China and Japan and countries like that every year. But last year it was online. And what that means is that most of the sessions from that assessment conference are available on YouTube. And again, in general, YouTube is our friend. You can find lots and lots of things there. So if you can get access to it in some way, that would be good. There's also, I think these are also available on the British Council website as well. Going up a little bit more advanced, this is another language assessment literacy page, the Language Testing Resources website by Glenn Fulcher, who was, again, one of the people I mentioned earlier on, quoted from him. This is from the University of Leicester in the UK. And this is very comprehensive. This is more for language testers than teachers, I would say, but would be of interest to teachers as well. And of course, there are professional organizations. EALTA is one of my favorites, and an organization that I have a lot of, and which is also very popular in Turkey. Many of you may be members. I hope you are. Please see the resources there. So, language assessment in the classroom MOOC is a project that I've worked on, and this is one of the ways that we can become assessment literate. This is available twice a year at the moment. It runs for 6 weeks. It's a 6-week course on the Future Learn platform, and it's completely free. And you just have to sign up, and when the course opens, then you send an email saying that the course is starting and you can do the course. And some of you may well have done this course already. I hope some of you have. It was quite popular in Turkey the last time it ran. So that's the MOOC. Well, what is the MOOC? It stands for Massive Open Online Course. It's for lots of people. They're usually free, not always these days, but usually free. The British Council one is free. And of course, it's all accessed online. They're usually made by universities or similar institutions. They can be about anything to do with education, to do with hobbies even. Unlike the other language assessment literacy resources I've shown you, there's a start and a finish date. So it is an actual course, and you do have interactions through kind of blogs, comments with both your peers, other learners, and through educators, for example, myself. Anybody can join, so there's no entry requirements. As I say, they're mainly free. However, because of that, lots of people sign up, as we know, and then don't turn up. So the number of people who actually finish any course is very small. But that's because naturally lots of people sign up and then just thinking, well, maybe there's a chance I'll do this course, maybe, and then they find out they don't have time and they don't go there. So I'm going to give you a few things. This is from the third time we ran the course. We first started it in 2018. The course has run 4 times so far. I'm going to show you a few things from the time we ran it in May 2020, which was kind of when the COVID pandemic was at its height. And we had 45,000 people enrolled on the course, which is about double what we've ever had before. 20,000 people actually turned up to do the course, which is quite high. And it was represented by nearly 170 countries all around the world. And you can see there, the darker the color on the map, the more people we had there. So you can see that the places like India, Bangladesh, Myanmar were had lots of participants, but there are also quite a lot of participants from Turkey, Russia, China, and places like that. And most of the people who came to the course were teachers, and usually quite experienced teachers as well. So just to give you an idea of what the course was like, 4-week course, quite traditional in terms of its structure, based around the skills and around important concepts like the CEFR, which a lot of people really don't know much about, washback, construct, etc. And also about, in week 4, about the test development cycle as well. This is just to give you an idea of what kind of course it is. We had some concerns over how to create the course. Again, it's supposed to be for teachers. What kind of language should we use? What kind of terminology? How much content should there be? What order should we put it in? Things like this. So I won't go into detail with that. But we did do some surveys of our participants, both before they started the course and afterwards as well. So we just get an idea about what the needs of the people coming to the course were. So we asked the participants, most of them were teachers, have you received assessment training before? And well, quite a few of them had, usually as part of teaching courses, so their teaching qualifications. But actually quite a lot of them had no training whatsoever. But most of them had developed language tests as part of their work, either as teachers or as specialists testing people. And actually, when we looked more closely at this, we saw that 1/5 of all of these people who said yes, they do develop language tests, had actually had no training in assessment whatsoever. So 1/5 of all language testers had been given no instruction in language testing. And we found that a little bit scary, to be honest. Natural, but scary. We asked them what skills they were interested in learning about, and very interestingly, speaking is the main one. So the productive skills in general, speaking and writing, are very popular, but there's a big need out there to know how to assess speaking and how to do it properly. So this is something that we need to bear in mind in our course content. Also asked about some ideas in assessment and how familiar they were with these. This just gives you, these were some of the things that we touched on in the course, but we wanted to know beforehand how much knowledge they had of these. Well, it varied. Things like construct, washback, CFR, really people didn't know very much about them at all. But the differences between formative and summative assessment, people had much better knowledge of. What were their expectations? Well, importantly, a lot of them said, of course, to improve their assessment in the classroom, but also a lot of it was about being a better teacher. So I'm hoping that by doing something about assessment, I'll become a better teacher in the classroom, and it will be for the benefit of my students. So this was very, very clear theme that everything that they were going to learn was going to be reflected back in their teaching, not just assessment. So this is quite encouraging and quite interesting for us to learn. So after they'd done the course, we asked them again, so, how familiar are you with these concepts? Well, the order of the familiarity had changed, but as you can see from here, the levels of knowledge have gone up quite a lot. So there's clear some benefit from the course. and those ideas which weren't well known have become much better known now. Okay, I'll move on. And they found, okay, we asked questions about, did you find it beneficial? Can you use it, etc. And they answered very positively to these. And interestingly, they also found the course interesting overall. So language assessment can be interesting as well. It really can. And we have the proof of that. So when you're doing this when you're giving courses to teachers, then it's important that we can try and make it accessible and even fun in some way as well. Okay, I'm going to skip through these because I don't want to take up too much more time. Maybe just look at this comment here. You see, this teacher started thinking about how teaching, learning, and assessment are integrated. And again, all based around the construct, the skills. So I love that last sentence. It says, if you teach to the construct, you're teaching for students to use language in real situations. And actually, I've taken this comment from, not from the third part of the course, but from the second time it ran, just because I love this comment so much. And this is what we were trying to achieve. Okay, so I'll just come to the final part now, conclusions and recommendations. What did we find out about the MOOC? Well, it has lots of benefits, especially for test takers, for the participants who are learning about the test takers, because it gave them flexibility to learn. They could learn when they wanted to. It was free. There was no cost to them. For us, for the people who created the test, well, it gets the British Council name in different places, so that helps us in a way, even though it comes at a cost. So the drawbacks are it takes a lot of time and commitment. If you're an educator on the course, you have to spend hours and hours responding to comments and doing other activities. Again, we don't, even though we did surveys, we don't really know about the people that we're reaching. And we don't know whether these people will go away and practice what they've learned in the classroom. So there's more research needed on the impact of these courses. It's all very well to say, we'll go away and we'll do this in our class, but at the end of the day, do people actually do that? So some final thoughts. As I said, this just to summarize what I've said, learning assessment, they're integrated. We're assessing students all the time. We need to teach to the construct, not to the text. Assessment literacy doesn't play a big part in teacher training for various reasons that we need to address. But there are opportunities available, particularly those online, and some things which I've shown you. And it can be beneficial, we think, as far as we can tell from our survey results, and engaging. It can be interesting. So what do we need to do? Well, what do people who work in testing need to do? First of all, we need to create good tests. And this creates positive washback. So every time you make a good test, then you're going to have a positive impact in all the classrooms in your institution. And that's something we need to remember. That's why it's going to have a positive effect on learning. And that's why we need to have good and useful tests. And we need to communicate that to students and to teachers. We need to be clear about what the purpose is. Is this something which is going to be formative and help with learning, or is it something which is going to be summative and is going to give people scores and we're going to make decisions about it? You go to this course, you go to that course. So we need to use both summative and formative assessment because teachers want to see the link with learning. So formative assessment is important as well. We need to create training opportunities for teachers and spread the word, show them why we're doing things and what the relationship is between assessment and student learning. What can teachers do? Well, there's lots of things. A lot of the things that you would normally do for teaching practice, these are valid for assessments as well. So things like action research, collaborating, forming a group with other teachers to think about assessment. If you have to make your own assessment, create it as a group. Never do it alone. Always work with colleagues. You can read each other's work, give feedback. It's so important. Use peer and self-assessment in class. Use the CEFR, use can-do statements if you're not doing that already. Demand inset events at your institution. Say, I want to learn about assessment. And then after you've demanded them, make sure you go to them as well. Use the online resources, some of which I've shown you, and I can give you links to these later. Pursue professional development qualifications. If you're studying for a master's, then do the assessment module in the master's, and the same with Delta and certificates and other professional qualifications. And always think about what the assessment means in terms of your classroom goals. What are the skills and abilities which are underlying the syllabus and curriculum on the one hand, the materials as you teaching and delivering the course, and also the assessment, because those all need to be joined together. Thank you very much. I think I've probably exhausted everyone.
Thank you very much, Richard. You gave us lots of useful insights into assessment literacy. And there will be some questions, I'm sure, but I just wanted to share a few highlights that I, made note of during this session. Some very important issues like assessment has a wider span than testing. So there is peer assessment, self-assessment, which also serve for formative assessment. So assessment doesn't mean summative all the time. And an essential key point actually is the alignment between curriculum, delivery, and assessment. So learning objectives, instructional activities, and assessment tasks should be in alignment, and specifications help us to align these properly. And there is a question that has been already asked by one of our participants, and our colleague asked, how can we encourage teachers to have a more positive view of assessment? This is a challenge, I know.
That is a challenge. That's something that we're still working on, I think. I think this is something which in testing, this has been a challenge for years and years. And believe me, if you're having this trouble, then be sure that lots of other people are having the same trouble as well. As I said, even my experience just talking to people from different countries, they really do have the same concerns and the same issues. Which brings us back to the question, what do we do? Well, we have to make those connections, I think. I think we have to, and we have to be transparent. We have to show that if teachers have knowledge of what assessment is about and what is underlying the assessment, then the assessment can be used for the benefit of the students. Unfortunately, we all live in societies. I know how things work in Turkey. In the UK, it's kind of the same. We're very assessment heavy, lots of standardized tests, lots of multiple choice tests. And that creates this culture of kind of negativity, I think, because we've all been through the system. It's quite stressful as test takers ourselves. So when we come to be teachers, you always seem to put yourself at a distance and see, there's a group of people who are in charge of testing, and maybe there's another group of people who are in charge of teacher training, maybe another group of people in charge of curriculum. As I said, what we need to do is get all those people together. And I think especially the teacher trainers and the assessors need to work together, and that's how we might start breaking down barriers. But I'm under no illusions it's not going to be easy, because these are things which culturally have been built up over many years. And I think maybe we have to accept that they're always going to be there to a certain extent. But we should try and break down the barriers as much as we can. And by, reaching out to teachers, showing them what we're doing, why the tests are as they are, and try to increase that awareness, then we hope that we might get a little bit more sympathy and empathy from teachers and for our tests.
Okay, and here's one more question. I know we're running out of time, but this is just the final question that we have, it seems. How can we improve the positive washback effect and understand whether it had positive or negative effect on the learners?
I think you have to think about having authentic tests. You need to have performance tests. So I said lots of teachers very interested in assessing speaking and how that can be done. So if you have speaking in your program, then you need a speaking test, or you need speaking assessments, formative as well, and mix those up. So, and if you have a speaking test, and if it's the right kind of speaking test, maybe it could be presentation, people doing pair work or group work together, maybe working on a task together collaboratively in the classroom. The closer those tasks are to what would normally go on in the classroom, or what you would want to go on in the classroom, then the better the washback is going to be. So basically you have to sample from all the things that you want to see happening in the classroom. Because if you miss any of those things out, then there's a good chance that teachers are going to say, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't on the test, so why am I teaching it? We don't have a speaking test. Why am I teaching speaking? We don't write this kind of essay, or this isn't in the text, this kind of thing, so why should I teach it in class? So you've got to be, as testers, we have to be very, very conscious of what that impact is going to be. And we can see, you can understand the impact. Well, you can talk to teachers and find out what the teachers are actually doing in their class. You can observe the lessons maybe and see what the students are interested in. You can talk to students as well and find out what they're doing and what their priorities are and what they are putting pressure on their teachers to do. This doesn't always just come from the teachers. The students obviously put a lot of pressure on us to say, we want to be doing the same as what's in the test next week. Why are you doing this other stuff? But I think at the heart of it, it's about creating good tests, and that's how we get good washback.
Thank you very much. We have another session at 2:30, a panel discussion. So maybe we can share other ideas, communicate, interact with the participants even more in a panel discussion. So on behalf of all the participants here, Richard, I would like to thank you very much for all the valuable